Style Studios. I'm here with Anthony Johnson, professional photographer. And so, Anthony, we came to you a couple of years ago because we needed some professional headshots. And what really caught my eye when I was looking through the plethora of options was, number one, your website was put together really well. And the quality of your product, even though I'm a neophyte when it comes to photography, I could tell you did a good job. And we had a great experience. I think we had like four of myself and four business partners come into your studios, well put together. So this is something that, again, I don't know a whole lot about in terms of actual photography, but how did you get started? Kind of just what's your story?
Man, that's an interesting story for sure. But so my journey started in 2013. So I was working at Dell. So I was, in the system, if you will, working at Dell as an engineer analyst assistant. I built laptops and servers, and at that time they were downsizing. So I was there for like 2 or 3 years, and they ended up downsizing, and I got caught in one of the layoffs. And so I'm sitting at home with my girlfriend. She had 2 kids, and I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. And I got to take care of business. And I was wanting to go into business for myself. I was tired of taking a chance and being reliant on someone else saying that I have a job or don't have a job.
All right, good for you.
So I was going through all the different options. I'm real big into fitness, so I was thinking about selling like protein shakes. I was just whatever, right? And she said, "Why don't you become a photographer?" And I was like, "I don't know about all that." And she's like, "You're really good at it. She's like, I can take 1 million pictures of the kids. You take one and it's good."
Well, I remember being in high school. There was that one kid in high school that
always
had the camera. They were always at the games. They were the official photographer of the school paper and the yearbook and all that. Were you that kid?
So I'm old, just for those wondering. So back in high school, we didn't actually have cell phones. So at the high school parties and even in my 20s at the parties, I normally had a disposable camera for those that would remember, and you had to get them developed at, say, like Walmart or whatever. I would have that camera, and I was just capturing, just because I liked capturing what was happening and then have those memories for later.
Right.
That's what it came down to. But anyway, so the girlfriend said I should become a photographer. So at the time, I had saved up some money, and like cameras were so expensive. They were like $800-900 and up. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to go all in, because in my past, I always spent like 1 or 2 years at a job, and then I got bored of it and went to something else. So I didn't want to invest $800 into something that I wasn't going to use. So nonetheless, I did it.
Right.
And when my camera came in, I had a buddy of mine. He had this product. It was like a cooler. And he transformed the cooler, and he would put these speakers in it, and you basically would hook up your phone, and you could float down the river, blasting the tunes.
I've seen those.
They're so cool. So anyways, he was like, "Anthony, I need you to take some pictures of for my websites of these coolers." And I was like, "I don't even have my camera yet." And he's like, "Well, when you get it." And so the next day or two, it comes in, and I was like, "Hey, I got my camera." I go over to his house. I don't know anything. Okay, I have no clue what I'm doing. And I just go out there and I'm just shooting things how I want them to look, like what I think would look good.
Right.
And so after I finished that, and I had a lot of fun doing that, a couple months later, he texted me and was like, "Hey, man, so Maximum Magazine picked up our product and they're going to publish your photo in their magazine." And I was like, "What?" So I thought that was pretty huge and a sign from above that I'm on the right path. Like, this is what I should be doing.
When you got published in Maxim, did it help you with brand recognition, or is it just the fact that you were published?
Yeah, so that's the thing. So I told them that they could use my photo as long as I got credit, right? Because I wanted that credit that's my photo.
Right.
And he said, "Sure, that's fine." And so when I got the magazine actually didn't put my credit in there. It had my friend's company in there.
Of course.
And so I reached out to my friend and I was like, "Hey, I think there's a slight oversight." Like, this is when I learned about licensing, like the hard reality that I didn't know anything about, which is anytime that anybody takes a photo or creates a photo, that becomes an IP, which is intellectual property. And then from there, you as a copyright holder, you own the rights on how that photo can and cannot be used. And even though I didn't have a written contract, which that's another thing I learned, that when I reached out to my friend to try to get that credit, there was a dispute on who actually owned the photo.
Right.
And anyway, it was a big mess. And all I wanted was for them to give me credit. So to answer your question, I didn't get the recognition because eventually it just became a big headache, and I just chalked it up as a lesson learned.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty much what happened with that.
Well, you learn your lessons, don't you?
I try to learn my lessons.
Yeah.
And there's been plenty of lessons that I have learned since then. So after that happened, I decided that it was probably a good idea for me to learn a little bit more about photography. So I took a summer course at ACC here in Austin, which is Austin Community College. So I took a summer course, it's like just a couple weeks long, and it's kind of like a broad overview of like how to use your camera, some settings and this and that. Took that course, loved it. I absolutely loved it. Teacher was great. The exercises were good, and I learned a lot about I learned a little bit about a lot of things, right? But it was enough to tell me that this is what I wanted to do. Like I was 100% positive this is what I wanted to do.
So you made an A in the course.
What's that?
You made an A.
Yeah. I don't know if they actually gave grades, to be honest.
Right.
I think it was just like, this is how you do stuff. Learn it. But yeah. So during that time, so what I learned in that class was to basically, so the most important thing I probably learned was like my exposure triangle. So in photography, so there's 3 things that affects a photo's exposure and your artistic expression. And that's going to be the shutter speed, that's going to be your ISO, and that's going to be your aperture. And so all 3 of those things work together on creating the type of image you want. So if you want like a nice blurry background, as people would call it, then you would want to open up your aperture to like a 2.8 or something like that.
Right.
If you want to freeze action, and you would raise up your shutter speed to like, I don't know, depending on how long your camera or your lens is, you would want to raise your shutter speed up to 500 to 1,000, whatever. That's going to freeze the action. So I learned all those fundamentals through that. The other thing that I picked up was because a lot of photographers at that stage, they don't know what they want to like get into, right? And so the teacher or the instructor told us to go shoot everything. Go photograph landscape, go photograph parks, go photograph people, go photo like everything. Just go photograph it. And whenever you're photographing that thing, when you get a really high sense of joy or you get really excited about doing it, then that could be your calling.
Right.
However, if you're about to do that thing and you get a sense of dread or like, oh, I don't want to do this, then you probably shouldn't do that. That was weddings for me. I shot a wedding. I didn't want to do it. So I know I don't like to shoot weddings. There's nothing wrong with wedding photography. It's just not my thing. But at that time, when I was learning all of this stuff, I got into photographing people. So I was doing a lot of portrait stuff. And then I got into because I really liked connecting and talking to people. And working with them. I got into models and actors and all that, started photographing a lot of models. This is where I ran into kind of an issue. And at the time, I was dating this girl, like I mentioned, she's the one that got me into photography. She didn't really like that I was working with models.
Really?
So
she heard the stories, did she?
Well, so the thing is like, I heard her, I understood where she's coming from. She didn't have anything to worry about. And so what I had done was I asked her if she wanted to come with me on all of my photo shoots. So I basically used her as my assistant. That way she can keep her eye on me, I guess.
Right.
But that way she was there just to reassure her that nothing's going on. But I was not about to do anything shady because I'm trying to build a reputation. You know, I'm trying to build a brand. I'm trying to build a company because this is what I want to do seriously. I'm not trying to get girlfriends or whatever else out of this. So anyway, so I'm continued working on my craft, shooting models, and male and female, all of them. And it came to a point to where I was so focused on work, or I should say photography, that I was starting to neglect my boyfriend duties, if you will, by giving her the attention that she needed. And so what was happening was a lot of my attention was going to the models, and it was taking away from her, and that she didn't like that.
Yeah.
So I had to learn. I learned this work-life balance where if I was going to work with models or just photography in general, that I really needed to have like a schedule, a set schedule on when I was going to do that. And then I needed to really set aside some time for family, for the kids. I mean, I took care of the kids all the time, but I was kind of neglecting the girlfriend a little bit.
Right. So let's speed ahead. And so you got laid off from Dell. You went to school for a little while to learn the basics, and you were able to start really getting on your feet. How long did it take you to really be able to do it full time?
Well, before we get to the full time thing, I just want to kind of touch on this one last part with just to finish out the girlfriend thing. So she didn't like that I was working with models, and she basically gave me the ultimatum that I needed to either quit photography or she was going to leave me.
Right.
And so
how's she doing these days?
Yeah, I don't know. So of course I chose photography, and then from there, after we split, I ended up moving to Florida, and this is going to kind of touch onto your question. I ended up moving to Florida, and I actually landed a job with a marketing company where they would hire me to go into the clubs and take pictures of the people in the clubs, and then they would use those photos for marketing. Right. So that's when I started doing it professionally, if you will. So I guess 2014 is when that started. So shortly after, and during that time, like I still didn't know a lot about photography. I was still learning. Just because I took one little summer course doesn't mean I know anything about photography. I knew a little bit, but I didn't,
Right.
So what I was doing was, there's a couple of different resources like online that I was watching. There's a website called Creative Live. I haven't seen them in a while, but during that time, there was a big influence on my education. They would, and this is not a plug by any means, but they would broadcast they would have a photographer come in, and they would do this whole workshop, like this whole training thing, and teach you all these things about photography, how to shoot, settings, like everything, like the whole class. It was free if you caught it live, but then you had to pay if you wanted to rewatch it. Mm-hmm. I made sure I set my timer every single time to catch anything that I could to watch those. So that's how I started. And I was just consuming everything I could while I was still working for this marketing company. And then shortly after that, there was an opportunity that opened up back in Austin. So this marketing company wanted me to do what I was doing in Tampa, but do it in Austin. And so they were called My Area Network.
Right.
And so in Tampa, it's 813 area. And so I negotiated with them if they would pay me a salary to do it here in Austin. So currently I didn't have a job because I'm coming back to Austin. Mm-hmm. I negotiated like a $2,500 a month salary, which is really low. But I was getting paid to do the same thing I was doing in Tampa, which is taking pictures at clubs. So I moved back to Austin. I started a 512 area here in Austin, which I don't think anyone's doing anything with it right now. But I started that, and then I started going out to all the clubs on 6th Street, and I was just doing photos for them for free at first.
Right.
So that way they could see the quality of the photos that I was producing. And a couple of bars picked up on it, and they hired us. And then because now I had some money coming in on a monthly basis or whatnot, that's when I decided to actually go to school full time for photography. Because I was getting paid a salary and I had free time during the day, I figured, hey, this is a great opportunity to go to school. So I went to ACC, checked into their photography course, their 2-year course, and this is where I learned everything about photography that I know today. I learned the philosophy of photography, the history of photography, which surprisingly was one of my favorite classes. Photography, the philosophy of photography is also really cool. How to read photographs was really interesting. Like just all these like basic core fundamentals of photography before getting into like how to shoot somebody or photograph somebody. So that was in 2015 is when I went to school at ACC. And then I came out at 2017. And then in 2017, because I have already learned all of this stuff, I learned that this marketing company was taking advantage of me by, I know it's sad, but they were basically taking my photos and they were turning a profit and not paying me a licensing fee for those photos.
Right.
Which, hey, I didn't know that at the time. Now I know that. So when I approached them, I was like, hey, I'd like to get paid for the licensing of these photos, not just a salary, right? Let's renegotiate this. And they basically said, too bad. And even though I had a really good relationship with the guy and he understood where I was coming from, he just couldn't afford it, is what it really came down to. So that's when I started my own Anthony Johnson Photography.
Okay.
And then that's when, because we were in the bars, and I said, dude, we need to be in the hotels. We need to be at these other places doing these corporate events, not in the bars, because there's no money in the bars.
Right.
And he didn't want to listen to me. And so I started my own thing, and I basically marketed myself as a corporate event corporate event photographer to do these corporate events at the hotels. And that's how I got into corporate events, and eventually led into headshots.
So you're doing pretty much 100% corporate focused right now.
Correct.
Okay. Changing the business world. This was a lot to talk about. We'll talk a lot about kind of how your business is changing, kind of what direction you're going to go to in future episodes. But man, thanks for coming in.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.